I remember the first time I met her. She was wheelchair bound. I was brand new to this work and a fairly recent new mom myself. How could I possibly help her? I had no previous experience working with adults with disabilities. I didn't know a thing about adaptive equipment or glioblastomas, which was the type of brain tumor she had, or what supportive services there were for parents with disabilities. How could I be sure that her child would be safe? Would I have to make a report to Child Protection Services? In that moment, I could clearly see all her limitations and all of my own.
Nurstory provides the opportunity for a group of nurses to share their stories about what it is to be a nurse. We often in nursing don't have that opportunity. We see that patient, we interact with that patient, and then we move on and we do it all over again. And oftentimes we don't share with anybody what really happens in that relationship. How did it affect us? How did we bring ourselves into that relationship? How is it that we make a difference in nursing? We know that we do. Do we ever tease out what is it that we bring to that intervention that makes the difference? And that's what we do in Nurstory. We sort of tease apart a moment.
Storytelling is such a quintessential part of the human experience. Listening to stories is what we do all day long, and then we come back to our team in case conference and we tell their stories in a very clinical sort of way a lot of times, infused most certainly with the humanity and trauma of their experiences, but also just with our medical lingo and stuff.
When you're a nurse, everything you do matters. So it's the relationship that matters. What we bring into the interaction matters. How we therapeutically use our history and our knowledge with that client is vital to the outcome that the patient has. So to be able to be reflective, to share our stories with each other, and to think about what really did happen in that interaction that I had with that client is enormously important to how effective we are, how safe we are as we practice.
My passion is integrating Nurstory in education, practice, research, and community engagement. And we can use Nurstory both to tell stories and also to listen to the stories of other nurses to gain perspective. Perspective taking is a big piece of it. Sharing our story often offers other people to tell their story. And so there's really unique ways we can blend it into our curriculum, as well as use it for research and understanding perspectives on certain phenomena that we may have inquiry into.
So I guess there are a couple things that you can talk about with regards to this practice of Nurstory. One is the process of coming together as a group of nurses to share stories with each other and actually find the story. The other part is the product that comes out of it. So the making of a piece that then can be shown, this story or this moment of learning, can have impact on how other nurses view their practice and their lives. To a space where hopefully you're going to remember or maybe realize that you haven't forgotten what you could do, which is to tell stories, which is what we actually do all day long, every day, and listen to them. But it might feel a little different in this process, where again, this might be something completely new for you, making a movie and doing it in a group setting and reflecting on your life for 3 whole days. So welcome to maybe being a beginner again in some things, and also being an expert and remembering that you're an expert in some things too about yourself.
I really have enjoyed getting into a space to really think deeply about the stories that I've been through. I feel like we don't have enough opportunities to tap into that left side of the brain. And I feel like that creative process really helps. It's helped me connect pieces of my life to the work I do and how the work I do connects back to the pieces of my life.
I feel like it's been amazing. I didn't anticipate myself enjoying it this much. I feel like I've learned a lot in just a short amount of time. Sometimes as a nurse home visitor, you feel kind of isolated, you know, driving all around town and going from place to place, and you're kind of on your own. It's very autonomous. And it's just been really awesome to be in the same room with people who know what we do and want to create the space to really give it some attention and recognition. And I feel like every nurse should do this kind of thing because you feel just connected to everybody else.
One of the things that I noticed at the beginning of the project, from the very first workshop that we taught, was we have this part of the workshop called the story circle, and most people, like, we run the story circle, everyone gets a chance to share their story, and and then it's kind of over. But with the nurses, that circle just would not end. It pointed a lot to how much nurses need to be talking and how little space they have to be processing what their experiences are. That, in every workshop, including this one with the Nurse-Family Partnership, you could just see that these people were deeply, deeply connected to each other and to each other's stories, and just were like sponges and wanted to hear more.
I've just been doing a lot of thinking about, it's been a pretty incredible experience to go from being a nurse home visitor to a supervisor to a nurse consultant. And I have a lot of thoughts about just what is that like to have all those different perspectives inside of me, that I still have the perspective of a nurse home visitor and as a supervisor and as a consultant, and I can still feel that when I talk with people. And I'm a really emotional person, so if I cry a lot, it's just because that's just who I am. Some of you guys in the room know that. And because I just love this job so much.
It's been quite the experience, especially just taking the time to reflect on that first day. It was really powerful, really intense. I think sometimes as nurses we do a lot of reflecting on our work, but not necessarily thinking about a deep impact that it has over time on us. And I think that's really important, that we take those longer pauses. So sometimes not just that hour in reflective supervision, but to be able to take 3 days and pause and think about my work and all the experiences I've had and where I've come has been a real gift.
I'm Jenny, and I came to this work a little later in my career. I was first worked in ambulatory women's health, and then I burned out on nursing and left it altogether for a span of years, and had some kids, and then decided I needed to just pay the bills and leverage that degree and get back into nursing. When I saw this opportunity, I thought, yeah, I want to do it for sure. And then also I have this story that I've been telling ad nauseum to my coworkers, and I thought I'm going to come tell it to some other people. So I'll have to hear it one more time. But I'm feeling very compelled and passionate about the plight of parents with disabilities.
My brain throbbed from lack of sleep. I was tearful and bleeding, blistered and torn. Feeding her was excruciating. I didn't know how to stop her crying, and it killed me when someone else could. Being a mom for the first time didn't look like the glossy photos in the magazines, and I wondered what was wrong with me that I couldn't do this thing that women have done for all of time. But there was nowhere else I wanted to be. I was committed to figuring it out. A few years later, I was meeting my first client as a home visiting nurse. She was a first-time mom who was wheelchair-bound. Her speech was garbled. Even signing her name was difficult. I was new to the work, and as I watched her struggle to sip water from a glass, I found myself wondering how she would navigate the physical demands of parenting. Immediately after her son was born, he was placed in foster care. She didn't have the luxury of time to figure out the hard work of parenting in privacy the way I did. She'd have to succeed while her every move was scrutinized under the watchful eyes of supervised visitations. At a time when every new mom wonders if she's doing it right, she was appearing before a judge facing neglect charges. Her baby was never in danger. The only thing she'd done wrong was to be disabled. I didn't know how to help, but I knew I wouldn't leave her to face these accusations alone.
As a supervisor, I hear a lot of stories, but it's important for me to remember my own experiences and my own connections. You don't usually have 3 days to sit and think about how awesome it is to be a nurse and then create a story and put music behind it and make it beautiful. And so it's just an amazing opportunity.
I had open heart surgery when I was 8 years old. My nurses in recovery were amazing. They took time with me and played games, like shoot the patient with water through syringes. I was determined to become a nurse. Throughout my first years in nursing, patients had given me various trinkets that helped create my image of the nurse I believed myself to be. Within the first couple of months of starting the NFP program, I found myself walking up to a door of a rundown apartment complex and the hallways just reeking of marijuana and urine. But I was filled with all the confidence in the world. I was there to make a difference, and I knew I would. Then Maggie opened the door. My heart sank. I stood immobilized. Maggie's face had a permanent mark of trauma that she had endured. Her smile had been carved out like the Joker from a past boyfriend. She looked at me awkwardly and invited me in. As she told me stories of alcoholism, abuse, and homelessness, I felt stunned. I had no words. What could I possibly say?
I think there's points where you start to feel burned out or overwhelmed, and when you take this long period of time to really reflect, it gives you this renewed sense of purpose and joy and excitement about your work, and so I think that's the impact it's going to have for me.
When our lives get busy, we just forget about the incredible stories and the incredible people that have been in our life.
I think there are two things that Nurstory could possibly do in the future and that we've made some inroads to. One is for nurses either with Nurstory or on their own to be doing more reflective practice as it impacts the way that they think about care and their interactions, again, with patients and with other providers. The idea that reflective practice is vital to their work is something that we would like to push forward. We also want stories to be used in nursing education to that effect. So it's not something that you're coming to late in the game as a practicing nurse, but something that you're trained to recognize that's part of your practice, that you need to be thinking about the interactions that you've had and be making meaning of them and understanding the impact that they're having on you as they're happening.
Students really love the Nurstory project and having the integration of these stories into their curriculum. So it's pretty easy, actually. The Nurstory project has a huge collection of over 100 stories of nurses. They're generally 3 minutes long. They're very powerful stories. And you can integrate these into your curriculum and use them as talking points to talk about ethics, again, to talk about social justice, to talk about different professional role experiences, and really to elucidate these concepts really well. So they can fit in any space and offer just a different way of moving into material. That's really important. Again, fostering that piece of relational connection. And also it helps build stronger learning communities because students listen to one another's experience and they offer their own. So that's good, yes.
Nurses come into a Nurstory workshop and they have no idea what to expect. They think that they have a story. They have it all written out, and I had a moment with this patient and this is what I learned, and I'm going to tell you about it. But what comes out of the workshop is that the nurse changes. The nurse is affected by her experience with that patient, by her experience with the other nurses in the workshop, by being heard. She understands what it is to listen, and she or he will oftentimes change the story in the middle of the workshop and get right to the point. This is what mattered. This is what happened. I really haven't thought about it until right now. This is who I am as a nurse.
And so these 3 days have just sort of expanded that opportunity to really reflect on a story, but that one story for me became lots of stories that I then had to kind of distill into the one story, which was an amazingly powerful experience. And I think that the idea of storytelling being a way of making meaning of our experiences is something that for me means that I will bring that back to clients in a way that I don't think I did before.
Hearing the stories and telling the stories increases our humanity, and I will bring that deeper appreciation back to hearing and telling the stories in our